Do you like epic games? Games that tell a story? Do you look for these unique PlayStations that you'll remember for 20 years? Hello fellow gamers, I'm Jean-Michel Grosjeu and you're watching my series of videos where I tackle the rules of heavy games. And not only the rules, also some few basic strategies to help you feel comfortable at the game table. So here we go, it's time to overcome my delicious French accent and take a seat together in front of that heavy game box. Welcome my friends, I'm Jean-Michel Grosjeu. Today we are taking off, leaving behind our old planet Earth thanks to Phil Eklund, the famous Swedish author, who needs no introduction, and his new game Interstellar, published in 2023 by Iron Game Design. A game he co-wrote with Justin Gray, a newcomer to the project in the latest High Frontier modules. Because yes, Interstellar is the latest installment to date in the BIOS Earth saga, which reenacts the entire history of mankind, starting with the appearance of life on Earth, BIOS Genesis, then the evolution of species, BIOS Megafauna, the developments of civilizations, BIOS Origins, and the conquest and colonization of our solar system, High Frontier. That's 4 games in a row, and here we are today at the long-awaited moment when mankind comes up with the great idea of finding a new habitable planet somewhere in the Milky Way, and that's what Interstellar is all about. In a series of 6 videos, thanks Jean-Michel Grosjeu, you'll be 100% capable of doing all this, that is, sitting down with your friends around an Interstellar game table and playing it to the end. No need to read any rules, just watch my videos and download the player aids from Board Game Geek, the links are in the description. In the first video, I'll teach you the basics, what your spaceship looks like, what the galaxy looks like, and what you need to do to save humanity. In the second video, we'll take a look at the basics of stellar navigation, how to maneuver a spaceship, explore the surrounding space, and manage onboard energy. Video number 3, we'll be talking about all the technologies the spaceship passengers will be able to develop to deal with all dangers and hazards. Video number 4, the human factor, the crew, their morale and the relations between the different factions, the different players. Will everyone travel in harmony or will the journey turn into a civil war? Video number 5, the end of the trip, the landing, but also a few technological tricks that the commander needs to know to land his friends more or less safely. And we'll finish with video number 6 by talking about post-humans and the not so desirable hypothesis that during the journey, the human species evolves so much that it no longer looks like the people who embarked at the start. Well, and without further ado, let's jump right in with video number 1. This is our galaxy, the Milky Way, and incidentally, the Interstellar game board. The Earth is to the left, it orbits the Sun, and so the whole point of this game is to leave Earth orbit and even the Sun's orbit with an interstellar vessel, the Exodus, in search of a habitable planet to distant stars like Proxima Centauri or Alpha Centauri, or even to unfamiliar places like the Lacaille 9352 system. Phil Eklund's theory is that before the big journey to the other end of the galaxy, the governments on Earth did sit down and decided that the crew of the Exodus, which when it arrives is to be the seed of a new humanity, well, this crew must represent a human society as a whole as faithfully as possible. And so, these elders from Earth summed up mankind's way of thinking in 6 major political philosophies. Here they are: individuality, freedom, honor, unity, authority, and equality. And these are the 6 players who will sit around the table. 6 players who embody the 6 great political philosophies of mankind. Okay, but how does it work in practice? Well, everything happens inside the ship, the Exodus. It is made up of 5 sections that the game calls blueprints. Here are a rough idea of what the spaceship looks like. At this point, let's take a quick tour since you'll be spending centuries inside. At the rear, the engines. In fact, as you'll see, you'll use them very rarely. There's not much fuel in the station because fuel is heavy. So you turn the engine on once at the beginning to give the initial impulse. Then you let yourself drift in the vacuum of space for tens or even hundreds of years, and you turn the engines back on arrival to slow you down. That's the logic of engines. Next, the batteries. This is the electrical energy required by all the ship's equipment. It's far more important than fuel. Batteries are fully charged when you take off, but you'll drain them very quickly. And finding a way to recharge your batteries will be one of the most important jobs for the scientists aboard. The amount of energy stored in the batteries is indicated by a large black die, 6 at the start of the game, and 1 is the minimum. The last point of energy can never be spent. Basically, it's the energy you need to keep your crew warm and breathing. So, if the die shows a 1, that means there's no more energy available. Then there are the jars. These are cryogenic capsules. This is where the bulk of the ship's passengers are kept. Frozen embryos who will have to survive the tens, if not hundreds, of years of the journey. There's a separate mat for these jars, 6 jars, 1 per player, so 1 per major ideological faction. And 2 frozen embryos per color, 1 male and 1 female. And you'll see that a large part of the game strategy lies in choosing when to defrost your characters so that they can finally become active and take care of your business for the time of their life expectancy. The next section, life support, consists of equipment designed to study distant planets in advance in order to find a more or less habitable one. Among this equipment is the goo, some kind of half biological, half technological nanoparticle jelly. More on that later. And finally, the wardens, the very front of the ship, where the airlocks are, and where the crew prepare for outside operations. As we will see later, a lot of important things are going on the nose of the Exodus. And that's all you need to know to start the adventure. You've got the Milky Way with the Exodus orbiting Earth ready to go, and the jar compartment filled with the 12 frozen embryos that are supposed to represent the human species when they land on the Eldorado they are sure to find. Now let's start with the only question that matters. What exactly is the crew's mission? Well, simple. It is to form a viable colony on an exoplanet and, if possible, several colonies on several exoplanets to increase humanity's chances of survival. And thus, we should now determine what a habitable planet is. First, the ideal planet is what Phil Eklund calls a Goldilocks planet, a reference to the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, a planet that's neither too small nor too large, neither too hot nor too cold, and so on. This kind of planet is not so common and can only be found close to some special stars, yellow suns and red dwarfs. You can recognize them on the game board by a yellow arrow pointer and a yellow text. Their location ensures plenty of sunshine and an acceptable temperature range. Then you need water. Sometimes the symbol for a drop of water is already printed on the board just close to the name of the planet, but 2 water symbols are needed for the planet to be habitable. Generally speaking, water is provided by an H2O counter which comes with all planets and is only revealed when you actually study that planet. The water on the token plus the water printed next to the planet's name must add up to at least 2. And wait, there is more. The planet's atmosphere also needs to be breathable, and that, in general, is unlikely to work on its own. So the crew must provide what's needed to terraform the atmosphere. And what's needed, the game calls it the right stuff, is, first of all, a very good theoretical knowledge of physics. This is represented by square wooden tokens called nuggets, more on that later. And also the crew needs more or less domesticated nanoparticles that the engineers are going to sprinkle into the planet atmosphere in the hope that it will do the job. The game calls it domesticated goo. And how much of it you need depends on the planet and the initial state of its atmosphere. In the game, this takes the form of an air counter, red or yellow depending on the star. When players work on studying the planet, we'll see later how they do that, they flip the counter to see what they need to bring for terraforming. Fine, let me summarize. To be habitable, a planet needs a good orbit around a good sun, that is, its name in yellow on a yellow pointer. It needs also water, that is, 2 drop symbols printed on the map or on the H2O counter. And finally, the right stuff to terraform the atmosphere as indicated on the air counter. And guess what? Such planets are rare, and sometimes failing to find the planet of their dreams, your crew will have to do with a more Spartan habitat. Like for example, some planets with no atmosphere, where life may only be possible beneath the surface in underground caves, and these are known as troglodyte planets. They are of 3 types: carbon planets found around brown dwarfs, icy moons found around gas giants, and phoenixes orbiting white dwarfs. You can recognize these 3 systems by their names written on a blue pointer. And in all 3 cases, to know whether a troglodyte colony can be established, the H2O token must bear the same planet symbol, brown dwarf, gas giant, or white dwarf. And even then, the required level of terraforming is so high that it demands a post-human among the crew. We will see what that means later, but you should know that it's a kind of failure for humanity. A post-human is a new version of the human species mixed with technology and AI. But hey, if there's no way to save humanity, at least we can save this variant of it. And so the mere presence of a post-human makes a troglodyte planet habitable, and as long as he is there, other human characters can land with him. And there you have it. At this point, you know what a habitable planet is. You know what you're looking for, and I can tell you it won't be an easy task. And still, there is more. Landing a Christopher Columbus on a rock at the other end of the galaxy is necessary, but it's not enough to ensure the future of the human species. Colonizing a second planet is much better. That means finding a second habitable planet and landing a second human colony. And then you have to measure humanity's chances to survival on these planets. You have to measure it in points. First, we count 4 points for each surviving human, either in a colony or still frozen embryos in the jars. It's assumed that once humanity has settled in, it will defrost them later anyway. Humanity is also more likely to survive if it has developed the technologies it needs. In the game, these technologies are represented by cards called work cells. The number of points they are worth is written in the bottom left-hand corner. And on top of that, the usefulness of each technology depends on what Phil Eklund calls the nature of reality. It's a rather philosophical concept and we'll just see what it means in a moment. In the meantime, you should know that it's a cross or a circle and that the points each card earns vary according to whether reality is objective, the cross, or subjective, the circle. Points are also scored according to the scientific progress made by each ideology. The game calls it augmentations. 5 wooden tokens that each ideology can earn. So each player gathers his or her own augmentations. Unlike the cards, the work cells, which represent technologies, some kind of patents, augmentations are more like general scientific knowledge. Humanity also earns points, chances of survival, if it has collected nuggets. In the game, these are wooden tokens. There are 4 possible shapes, 2 crosses, 2 circles. But for a given game, 3 are drawn at random, secretly at the beginning of the game. The 4th is discarded. So one of the 2 symbols has a majority, either 2 crosses for 1 circle or 2 circles for 1 cross. And this majority symbol is what is called the nature of reality. Circle reality is subjective, cross it's objective. We'll take time later to explain this in detail, but basically, these nuggets are relativistic particles extremely rare and which the Exodus will try to collect to confirm or disprove the greatest laws of physics. And so, at the end of the game, each of the 3 nuggets, these 3 pieces of ultimate knowledge, is worth 4 victory points. Next, we get 4 points per medallion. Medallions are awarded to crew members when they perform heroic deeds, when they do actions that weigh on the future of humanity. There are 14 possible medallions in 6 different shapes. And, as we already mentioned, mastering the goo is essential to terraforming planets. The goo is a kind of nanoparticles cloud that's half biological, half technological. There are 5 types of goo corresponding to the 5 technologies we have already seen, and I'll explain how it all works later. Just remember for now that these 5 tokens represent humanity's mastery over one of the goo types, and each token scores 4 points. And finally, 4 points for the commander, that is, the player with the sheriff star. We'll come back to all this in detail later, but for now, it forms a list of everything you need to gather as a crew on your way to the planet of your dreams, and if possible, the 2 planets of your dreams. And your overall success will be measured by the sum of these points. Okay, now we get it. In this mission, you 6 players representing the 6 great ideologies of mankind sum up your points and therefore your efforts to save the world, right? All 6 ideologies fighting side by side on a cooperative mission. Unfortunately, things are a bit more complicated than that. So, in a normal case, all 6 players cooperate. They colonize their planets and they add up all the points they have earned, regardless of who earned them. If they don't exceed 100 points, I'm sorry to dampen your spirits, but it won't be enough. Mankind won't survive more than a few generations and then it's all over. So, even if a planet is colonized, with as few points as 100, one can say that the Exodus mission has failed. Above 100 points and up to 140, okay, humanity survives, but just barely. It's not growing anymore, it's vegetating on its new planet, maintaining its size year in, year out, and that's just a little better than extinction. And if you want to do better than that, that's when you need to have colonized at least 2 planets. And then, between 141 and 160 points, humanity will adapt quite well and continue to grow greatly. Beyond 161 points, it's a new beginning, a new era for mankind, a future that's undoubtedly better than what he had on Earth. And you're starting to get the picture. But wait, there's more. There's one more vital condition for the survival of humanity. To ensure the startup of a new human colony, at least one woman must be present. Without a man, we can get by, but without a woman, it doesn't work. And so, among the few human representatives you're going to land on the new planets, there has to be at least one woman. At least one among the 6 who embarked at the start. If you end up without any woman, you can have all the points you want, it's all over for humanity. Note that it can work with an hermaphrodite, a technology you can develop along the way, but that's a very special case. And now it's time to talk about nuggets again, because they are such a central concept in this game. If players want to do better than current humanity, that is, if they are aiming for the top 2 win categories, well, they need to discover nuggets. 2 nuggets for the best possible victory. We'll see later how to collect these nuggets, but for now, just remember that to be valid, they have to be face up at the end of the mission. And the only way to flip them face up, so to see whether they are crosses or circles, is to perform what is called foolhardy experiments. You can recognize these experiments by this symbol. These are fundamental physics experiments that reveal the very nature of reality and which, in a more practical way, turns the nuggets face up to reveal a circle or a cross symbol. And then you've got the final picture, everything you need to save mankind. That being said, under some circumstances, it can happen that things don't go so well. Times when things don't go badly, but differently. In some case, one of the 6 human ideologies, one of the 6 players, decides to take the upper hand. The game then becomes competitive instead of cooperative, and in the end, there's only one winner. Basically, this happens when a player becomes post-human. We'll see what this means in terms of gameplay later, but for now, a post-human is a human so technologically enhanced that he or she becomes a new species. And in this case, it's not really humanity arriving on the planet at the other end of the galaxy. It's something else. And that's why the game becomes competitive. It becomes a Darwinist struggle between several versions of humanity. And in this case, one planet must still be colonized, but only one is enough, and there must be at least one woman or post-human on that colony. And then, if it comes down to it, only one player, one ideology wins the game, and it's the most advanced player, that is, the one with the most victory points. So, this time, victory points are counted on a player basis. And note that it's not necessarily the player who controls the post-human who wins. And even a player without any surviving cyborg can win. Note that what we call a cyborg in this game is just a regular human being. And last but not least, for the sake of completeness, the mission can also become competitive following certain foolhardy experiments. We'll look at this in detail in a later video. And there we are. You have a definitive vision of what humanity expects of you. Find a habitable planet or 2 and colonize them as efficiently as possible, efficiency being measured in victory points. And note that there's a connection between the bottoms of the tables, since to colonize a troglodyte planet you need a post-human, and this necessarily triggers a competitive game. For this reason, it's always best to find Goldilocks planets and complete the mission in a cooperative way. And let me digress for a moment before we move on. Interstellar should never be mistaken for a Eurogame where you optimize victory points to win in the end. Interstellar is an immersion game very close to a role-playing game, and when you decide to board the Exodus, you have to keep in mind that you are the hope of mankind and you cannot play fast and loose with the dreams of mankind. So when you come to decide, for example, whether it's better to land a post-human on a godforsaken planet if this is the Exodus crew's last chance of survival, well, don't just think in terms of cooperation or competition or count victory points like bookkeepers. No, you'll have to ask yourself some philosophical question and weigh up your final decision, not in terms of I win or I lose, but as a more nuanced vision of what you've really accomplished for the future of humanity.